5 scores! Rick Vaughn.
We've decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Vaughn, Gary Madden.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 116 of the Squid and Ultimate Leafs Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how are we keeping?
We're not too bad, Michael. We're getting through the last bit of snow, hopefully, here. Getting ready for golf season.
Yeah, well, it's going to be pretty tough finding your ball in some of the fairways, the way the stuff's been dropping the last few days.
Yeah, that's, I wasn't expecting that, but then again, March, we usually have one or two good storms, and then things start getting better.
Well, we're praying for the better. And speaking of the better, they don't come any better than today. How'd you like that? How about that for a lead-in, right? Because that's just absolute skill of the podcaster. Squid is someone you're very familiar with, but Leaf Nation's very, very familiar with. He was originally drafted first overall by the Quebec Nordiques in the 1989 draft, spent the first 4 years of his career in Quebec before being traded to Toronto, where he played the majority of his career, serving as captain for 11 seasons. He's the all-time leading Leaf goal scorer, points leader, first Swedish player to score 500 goals, averaged better than a point a game over his career, 3 gold medals with Sweden at the World Championships, and a team captain to Sweden's gold medal in Turin in 2006 at the Olympics. He was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2012, named one of the 100 greatest players of all time, and has a statue in Lenswood Row outside of Scotiabank Arena. I have to stop there, Squid. We only have so much time, okay? We can't keep going on about this. That's enough.
That's pretty damn impressive.
Well, without any further ado, all right, let's welcome Matt Sundin. Matt, first off, thanks for joining us, and how's things?
Everything is great. Very nice introduction there. I got to remind my kids once in a while that I had a good hockey career back then. They don't listen to me nowadays.
Well, so how are you?
All you need to do is show them what Mike just said, and then they'll understand.
Exactly. Nice to have me. Thanks for having me on board today, guys.
So now, how are you keeping busy these days?
Well, I'm there. I talked to another former teammate today. I said, you had your small children during your career, and I had them after. And, the kids are 10, 8, and 6. So days are over here chasing them around. We just had a winter break last week where the kids were out of school, and we were up in the mountains here skiing and all that. And now I need to go on a vacation after that. Chasing the kids around. I thought it was hard playing in the National Hockey League until I start taking care of the 3 kids. But everything is great. 3 kids. I got some other businesses going. I have my foundation with University of Toronto and Karolinska Institute. We nominate. We have a postdoc that we fund doctors for their postdoc studies. So I have spent some time doing that. So things are busy. That's
fantastic. Well, you just answered the question I was going to ask you. Do you still keep in touch with a lot of guys in Toronto that you played with?
There's a few guys, I think as many of you know, everybody is living far away from each other, and everybody gets on with their lives after their career. But we had a great week in here when Rick and some of the guys from Toronto was over for the Börje Salming game, and stay in touch with a few guys. But as years go by, and if you're not in the same area or you don't meet up for hockey things, it could be long between the meetings, but it's always great to see each other. And every time you do, it feels like yesterday, right?
Well, I was going to ask you about the Börje Salming, tribute and event that you guys just partaked in. Squid has been telling me all about it, and he said, how emotional it was, just how fantastic it was. Now, from the Swedish side, how did you view the whole event?
Well, I think it was really good. I think we raised a lot of money for the ALS Foundation that Börje started. I think Brynäs, the town Gävle where Börje played 2 years in the Swedish league, did a fantastic job of arranging this event. You know, it's a sold out arena. They broadcast it nationally on TV, which made it obviously helped us raise a lot of money. And the most important thing, that Toronto Maple Leafs came over with an alumni team, and I think for us that are part of the alumni of Toronto, and many of us don't get a chance to come to Toronto on a weekly basis. And for Rick and all the guys coming over from Toronto for this weekend, it's a long trip. It's a big commitment, but that really made the whole event as good as it was. So there's a lot of different parts, but big thumbs up for Toronto alumni making a trip over and making this event happen.
Squid?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I enjoyed every single minute of it. Well, except at night, I never got much sleep. But but other than that, the whole event was fantastic. Getting to see Börje's kids that I hadn't seen for however many years was unbelievable. And I think Matt said it the best. The place where he played before he came to the National Hockey League did an unbelievable job of putting this event on. The rink was full. It was, and the best part about it was the Leafs alumni won.
Exactly.
Wasn't there sort of a code you're supposed to let the home team win?
No.
Now, would you like to see this as a regular occurrence or an annual occurrence, Mats?
Well, I think there was a lot of talk about maybe doing something similar in Canada. That would I think come out really well. And we like Rick said, we looked at their lineup before the game, and I said, guys, we gotta be in trouble here. They had the Lidströms and Forsberg and Henrik Sederberg. I said, God, is he allowed to play? He just retired. There's a bunch of other guys there. So, but we did a really good job, and I think the amount of money that we raised, and when you have all these great players from the Toronto alumni, but also from Team Sweden, really many of the best that played the last 20 and 30 years, a lot of people came out, and what a great cause. So it'd be great to see something similar happening hopefully in Canada the next time.
Fantastic.
Well, I know they're working on it, Mats, and
great.
I think they're if they do it, they'll end up getting a charter for the Swedish guys to all come over to Canada.
Yeah.
So hopefully that comes to fruition and it happens. It would be great and
awesome.
But
well, I was going to say
it would be fabulous.
Yeah, that's something that definitely should be done on an annual basis. And I know the reception over here would be fantastic, as you guys both know, but the reception they've been getting, how highly thought of Börje was to the hockey community, not only at large, but particularly in the Toronto area. Yeah. And just brings me to the question, Mats, how influential was Börje in your career?
Well, we're such a obviously different generation, but I had the chance, my first Canada Cup when I was 20, Börje was on that team. So we did play a Canada Cup together in Toronto. And then the most important thing, once I got traded to the Maple Leafs, he was really the first. I was up actually in Kiruna, where his hometown, at the time when I found out about the trade. So I talked to Börje pretty much the same day, and that was very important for me. And then throughout my career with the Maple Leafs, when things are going well or things are being tough, he was always there as a great mentor for me. And when I was asked to get a chance to be the captain, I wasn't sure what to expect from that, but he was so convincing, telling me, you have to take it, Mats. That's a huge honor to be the captain in a National Hockey League team, and especially for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he was really monumental in my decision there, and he was always such a great supporter throughout my career. So he was very important for me.
Yeah, now that was interesting. Now, I always wondered, because I remember when Harold Ballard, he just came up to me and he says, "You're the captain," and I'm like, like, what do you mean? Like I'm the captain? I was 22 years old, and I'm thinking, but if I say no to him, he's going to trade my ass.
Yeah.
And he more than likely would have if I had said no. And so Börje was, I'm assuming he turned it down, I think, just before Ballard told me that I was the captain. And I think that probably is one of the reasons why he told you how important it was to take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he told Rick and I on the podcast when we had him on a couple of years ago that the biggest mistake he made in his career was not accepting the C of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
And he said it was more a language concern than anything, nothing to do with the team or anything like that. But when he spoke to you, he was very insistent. He said to make sure that you understood what it meant and you should take it.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly what he told me exactly the same thing. He said it was an opportunity that I felt at the time that I wasn't ready to do, but he really regretted that the rest of his career.
So let's.
Yeah, well, he helped me along the way too, Matt. He sat right beside me for 7 years. Yeah, and I got to tell you, he was so supportive when I was a young captain, and those are things that I'll never forget. Yeah, for sure.
Well, you also had you got to tell the devil. You got to tell Matt's the devil story. You had the devil on one side.
Yeah, it's kind of. So I get traded to Toronto, and I get seated in the middle of Ron Ellis on one side and Börje on the other side. So it was kind of like that cartoon where you have the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other one, because Ron was a born-again Christian at the time. And I'm going, which way do I go? And obviously I went more towards Börje's side, obviously. Now, I didn't go skiing in the afternoon of a game or anything, but had a lot of fun.
Yes. Well, so let's take Matt's back and just start off, like, take us through the early part of when you were a kid growing up and starting to play hockey, how you got involved in the game and just how you got going.
You know what? I think it would look very similar to what Rick went through as a child. I think Sweden, as you know, hockey is one of the, maybe not as much national sport as in Canada, but it's right up there with soccer. So, and we have the same winters you do. So it was just playing street hockey right from the beginning. We didn't have the connection to the National Hockey League in those days, the 80s and 90s, just because of media. We were able to see some highlights, but like 2-3 days later. So the big idols that we grew up looking at was the national team and the players that were there, and NHL Swedish players coming over for the big tournaments. But hockey, my dad is a former hockey goalie as growing up, and so we come, and my mother is even more interested in sports, and that's sports in general, not only hockey but anything, and that goes on right now. They watches cross-country skiing world championship, whatever is on TV, and so my background is really from a sports family. Two brothers. I was in the middle, and as you know, that you're in the middle or the younger one, you want to do what your older brother does. And my older brother starts skating. We have a little lake outside our house where I grew up, and street hockey, anything with sports, but obviously hockey was always number one for me growing up.
Well, I can tell you two stories about Sweden. I played in Division II in the 70s. And the day I arrived, I played in Gotland in a little town called Roma.
Oh, great.
And when I got picked up at the airport by one of the team managers, first thing he says to me is, Mike, very, very sad day in Sweden today. I said, what's wrong? Joran, his name was. And I said, he said, Ronnie Peterson died today.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who Ronnie Peterson was.
Yeah.
But it turned out he was a racing car driver and he was a national hero. Yeah. So then I started paying a little more attention, because then a month or so later, I went to go get a coffee one day, and I go into this little restaurant and I'm standing and the guy's ignoring me, and he keeps going, shh, 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 and they're turning the radio up. And meanwhile, the guy behind me, Mike. I go, yeah, he goes, Ingemar, no speak. I go, what? And it was Ingemar Stenmark, the downhill skier. They were listening to the race on the radio, and the whole place stops.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then with Bjorn Borg, was at his height. So sports was just like, it was dying for every Swede that I came across in those days.
And those are some big, Ronnie Peterson obviously was one of the top F1 drivers in the world at the time when he passed away. And you're right, Ingemar Stenmark. I remember going to school, 7th, 8th grade. We would stop class. The teacher would roll in the TV, watch his race, roll the TV back out just to see him race. I mean, Björn Borg, Ingemar Stenmark, Ronnie Pedersen, Börje Salming, and there's been many others. But Sweden is just like Canada. Sports is very important for the culture in Sweden, and where hockey is really, really up there. When the national team in hockey plays, I would say it draws the most viewers as well of all sports. So it's a very important sport in Sweden, just like in Canada.
So Mats, early on, like you're playing minor hockey, like what was it like for you, like with two brothers as well? Because I know in Canada it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And even back in the 70s or I hate to say it, but the 60s when I was playing, it was very costly. So my parents kind of didn't go out for dinners and buy fancy stuff. It was all about getting us what we needed.
Yeah. You know what? Sweden too. My parents, my father worked for the phone company in Sweden. I come from a middle-class family. Our vacation trips went either to my grandmother in where my dad is from, or very up north where my mother is from. So first time I went abroad from Sweden on vacation, I think, was actually when I was 15. And I went to play in a tournament in Manitoba. Our hockey team with parents and everything went to play in Manitoba. First time we left Sweden actually was a hockey tournament. I went to Canada. What a huge adventure that was. And we stayed in Canada for 2 weeks, I think. And that really helped put fuel on the fire, on the hockey fire, that I want to continue to play hockey. But Sweden has the same problem, Rick. And it's even more, you see even a bigger problem today where hockey is becoming a sport that is only for people that can afford it and wealthier family. And hockey in Sweden hasn't grown since the 70s or 80s. So, we still have only 75,000. I think it's 80,000 registered hockey players. Hasn't changed since the 80s. And the big cities, tough with the building new rinks and everything. So the Hockey Federation in Sweden has its job cut out for them to keep high level of hockey for the national team. We need to do more for the grassroots hockey in Sweden as well.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a little thing. Danny Daoud called me last week, and he asked me to go to a game. It was a junior game of Junior Outlaw Junior A. It was near my place. He said, I want you to go look at this kid. He's still got midget availability, and I want you to let me know. So I go to the game. These kids are paying $10,000 a year to play Junior A hockey in this league. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it cost me $15 to get in to watch it, for God's sakes. I was like, then he goes, I'll give you the money when I see it. I said, don't worry about it, Christ. It's only $15. But, hey, that's a lot of money for to watch a Junior A, not OHL, but Tier 2 Junior A, especially an outlaw league, which, like I told Danny, I said that the hockey is awful. I said, the kid I went to see was good, but the hockey was terrible.
Yeah. Now, Mats, at what age did you think playing in North America might be a possibility? And was there a point during that period when you sensed you were starting to separate yourself from the other kids your own age as your ability was accelerating?
Well, I think, both my brothers played hockey. I'm in the middle, and I would easily say that, and my parents would say that once we started too, I was blessed with a bigger talent than both my brothers. But, the dream of the National Hockey League wasn't really there until, you're 15, 16, you understand that the Gretzkys were obviously the best players in the world were in the National Hockey League. And very coincident, the first time when I really thought, I might have a chance to go over there was a European national tournament where Sweden, Russia, Czech Republic, and Finland play a 4-nation tournament, and there was first time scouts there, and one old, he wasn't older at the time, and this is like 1988, maybe 87 even. He came up to me. He had gray hair already, and he had a big cigar. And he gave me a Vancouver Canuck pin, and he said, Matt, keep going. I think you're gonna have a chance to get to the National Hockey League. And it was Pat Quinn, And so when I ran into Pat, so that was the first meeting, and then I didn't see Pat until he became the coach and GM for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, I saw him in coaching other teams, but what a coincidence. But that was the first time, and he had that. Pat Quinn had that, such a great speaker and very. He had a presence, and when he said that to me, looked me in the eye, I said, "Wow, maybe I have a shot to make it into the National Hockey League."
Yeah, what a great person Pat Quinn is.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being at different appearances with him, and we'd be up till 3:30 in the morning talking about hockey and obviously drinking and that kind of shit. But what a wonderful person Pat was, and very, very knowledgeable as far as hockey goes.
Yeah.
So what were you being contacted your draft year or the year? What did you know about the NHL draft, and any teams approaching you about possibly drafting you, and how it all worked?
Yeah, yeah. By the time I got to be, in my draft year, obviously, it was I had a big season with Team Sweden. Djurgården, the team I played for that year as well, getting drafted, and I remember there was a few of the agents coming over from Canada to visit me and my family. We had some meetings, and obviously we had a feeling that I was going to be able to go top 5 in the draft, and we made our way over to Minnesota that year. I ended up hiring Bengt Lundholm, former player for the Winnipeg Jets. He worked for an agent, and we really liked him, and I ended up going over and for the draft for 89, but obviously didn't know. And I did the interviews before the draft, obviously, I think the Islanders were really high up there, and Quebec Nordiques, obviously, and some of the other teams. So it was a fantastic experience, and my really first time anyone in Sweden really understood anything about the draft. We didn't have any other player before that going that high in the draft, so it was really an eye opener for the people in Sweden to what the NHL draft was all about as well. So it was a fantastic experience.
When did you learn when Quebec was going to take you?
I think we had a meeting just during that week in Minnesota, and they told me before the draft that we are going to pick you. So I kind of knew. I think I knew just days before that, actually, or a day before maybe.
Well,
but you never know until it's done, I guess.
Yeah,
you never know until they actually call your name, I guess. And
exactly, people change their mind.
Well, you look at the last couple of drafts. Wright was supposed to go first last year. I mean, everybody was talking about it, and he ended up going fourth or fifth. Yeah. So I mean, things can happen leading up to the draft day on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, so do you have any going through your interview process? Any interesting questions from some of the teams?
Sorry, I'm getting my phone is running out, so I get some
get some juice.
Charger in there too. Sorry, go ahead. Say that question again.
Yeah, I was going to say, going through the interview process, did you get any interesting questions?
I think there were, I can't really remember that much about the interview process, and but I know as the last few tournaments we played as juniors there, where you talked a lot to the scouts, obviously the last few tournaments, and they try to find out more about your personality. I think they're doing even deeper due diligence nowadays on the kids being drafted than maybe in '89. But it was a great experience, and there was nothing. I can't remember anything of the really if there was anything special about the interviews that at that point.
So, talk about arriving at your first NHL camp.
Sorry, guys. I hear you back here now. Better.
Okay, but
Sorry.
Hey, this is all part of recording live. This, when recording, we can always adjust this.
Sorry.
Talk about your first NHL camp. Did you have any idea what you're in store for? And did you obviously you did say you spoke to other Swedes about what to expect, but what was your initial impression?
Well, it was a shock coming into training camp. I think obviously Quebec Nordiques had a very young team. I think the average age was 21. It was a rebuild. Joe Sakic was a big star, but he didn't have not much support in the lineup when I came there. The level of competition, when you come into training camp, was something different from coming to the Swedish league. Coming from the Swedish league and the Swedish system, I think it's a big difference now. I think the Swedish players learn earlier now, but that was a big culture change for me to understand how hard guys were competing in training camp, on the ice, off the ice. The level of accountability from the coaches that they asked from the players, and especially for your high draft. So it was a culture shock that it took me a while to adjust to, but it really made me so much better as a player and made me grow up also,
Yeah,
I was not 19 going over there, so it was a very, very important year for my, I think, development as a player. I was always a big talent, but to learn those other important aspects of the game was something my first few years really helped me do over there.
Squid?
Yeah, no, what was it like in Quebec for you when you first got there and during the time you were there, obviously with the language difference and everything? Yeah. I mean, we're not talking English, we're talking mostly French in Quebec City. Was that a little bit difficult for you, or did you get through that okay?
No, it was, Rick, luckily enough, it was all English, with the guys and in the team, coaches. That's a regret I have, actually, that I didn't get to take the opportunity to actually learn French, being in that city for 4 years. But, in terms of what all the communication with the coaches, players in the room was pretty much all English. And, in Sweden, you get English from second and third grade in school, so that was easy to adjust. But as the year passed by, obviously, you learn to read French and understand some of the stuff going on. But it's one of those things where you're young, but as you get older, it would have been nice to learn a lot of language there, and I had a really good opportunity to do that. But you get away good playing in Quebec, and I'm sure in Montreal too, just speaking English as well.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I had the same thing. I was born in Ottawa. I lived there until I was almost 9 years old. My sister was a year older. We both could have been very bilingual very, very easily. French school, English at home, whatever. Yeah. But my father taught my mother how to speak French, and I always wondered why he never made us learn French. And then I realized years and years later that the reason was because when they didn't want us to know what they're talking about, they spoke French, my mother and my father.
Yeah.
But again, that's one of the things that I wish I had been bilingual, because I played junior in Quebec and played with a lot of French guys over the years.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, you did mention Joe Sakic just a couple seconds ago as a budding star. Yeah. So maybe talk about him, and also that same year, or it was on the other end, Hall of Fame material, Guy Lafleur. So from one spectrum to the other, how was all that? Like, how did you absorb all that between those two?
Yeah, very fortunate to play with Joe Sakic. I think he was very important for me in my first few years. At the time, one of the absolutely best young players in the league, and he wore the C right away when I came over there. So he really helped me develop and take those next steps as a player. And like you said, one of my strongest memories my first year with the Quebec was coming down to that first game, really nervous, 19, and I was there probably 3 hours before the game. And I walk into the Quebec in Nordique's dressing room, and all the sweaters are up there. And one, that was such a amazing feeling, I remember. And there was one sweater, all the gear missing. It was Guy Lafleur's. And I walk in the back room, and as I come in there, I look, there's Guy Lafleur. He's already dressed like 2.5 hours before the game. He's doing his skates on and everything. And he looks at me and he said, "Mats, great to see, preparation is everything if you want to have a long career and being a great hockey player." and that stuck with me my whole career, but it was such an amazing and realizing how big he was in hockey in North America. It didn't matter if we're in LA or Vancouver. When he got the puck, Guy. That was huge. And then his standing ovation in Montreal. I think it was 17 minutes we waited on the blue line when Guy was doing the laps. That's a long standing ovation.
Well, he probably deserved it.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, now, Mats, you start to advance at a pretty rapid pace in Quebec. This young team is really blossoming. You're lighting it up. But all of a sudden, there seemed to be something missing from the team. But then June 28th, 1994, your life would change forever.
Yep.
You're moved to Toronto on a massive deal. Yep. You were home in Sweden, I assume, at the time when you heard about this. We talked about it earlier. What was your initial response when you heard this? Or we told?
Well, it was. I know we were talking, or my agent at the time was talking contract with Quebec Nordiques, and so we kind of had a feeling that things were not going so well with the negotiations. And he told me something might happen this summer, so I wasn't that surprised with the trade. And coming to Toronto, though, I had no idea what to expect. Obviously, with what it meant being a Toronto Maple Leafs and the city of Toronto and the fans and all that. So that was a big, huge change, even though hockey is huge in Quebec City and in Quebec. So hockey and, Toronto is the hockey capital of the world, and being part of the Toronto Maple Leafs was such a huge difference from the first 4 years in the National Hockey League.
Squid.
Yeah, I mean, was Michel Goulet in Quebec when you were there?
No, I think he left a year before I came over there, 1 or 2 years before.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, coming to Toronto, obviously, I mean, what did you think? And of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs, much like the Montreal Canadiens, are kind of like the Yankees in Major League Baseball. And so it must have been I mean, I know it's big in Quebec City, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's unbelievable how they're followed there by their fans, but Toronto's a different animal, like Montreal. What was your first impression when you got to Toronto and all the things that were going on?
Well, I think Börje Salming really helped me in terms of preparation that summer before I went into camp. I think my first year also was a lockout year. I don't think we didn't start until December or even January, I think. But it was a huge change, just the way the team was followed and the magnitude of the care and interest from the city of Toronto, the media, the pressure on the players. Quebec, Montreal, Quebec Nordiques was also very important, but with just the magnitude of the city of Toronto and the franchise itself made it even more on a loop. And it didn't help you got traded for one of the most popular players for the Maple Leafs as well. So the first few years were it was really tough to make everybody happy in Toronto. I remember that.
So there must have been obviously a big sigh of relief on your part when you got off to a good start and you started producing, because did you start feeling, well, you said maybe it took a couple of years, but did you feel the fans starting to warm up to you and maybe seeing why that trade did take place with the way you responded by producing?
I'll say it took about 4 or 5 years.
Oh, I think you're being modest.
No,
I think you are too.
You're being a little too modest.
I'm just kidding. But it was hard, and really, once you look back at your career and all that, it's you realize why Wendell Clark was so popular in Toronto, and also with such a different type of players. And Wendell, with his obviously goal scoring ability, his leadership abilities, he played a hard-nosed game, dropped the gloves with anyone. And you bring in a Swedish player that they all know he doesn't like to drop the gloves or play in that game. So I know it was an uphill trying to convince the Maple Leaf community of fans, the great fans, that I was going to be able to help the team and do it in my way. We were completely different players, but but really those first years with the Leafs too really made me, when things, and we missed the playoffs a few years and things were not going that well, or it really put more fire put more fuel on my fire to show that I can be a great leader for the team. I can be a great player. And also I want to make sure that we have playoff success. So it really made me stronger those first few years in Toronto.
Well, not only that, replacing Wendell Clark coming in and trying to do that. A couple of years later, they replaced one of the most popular captains, Squid, of all time, with Dougie Gilmour, and to make you captain. I mean, somebody must have had it out for you, saying, "What are they trying to do to me here?" God Almighty.
Yeah, I think Doug, that when he left, obviously he was. I think it was he and there's another. I mean, both Doug and Wendell, Joe Sakic were so important for me in the early stages of my career in terms of leadership and becoming a good player and adding qualities to my game that, as a player, you always try to, there's certain things you do well, but there's other things you have to improve. And those guys really helped me improve with the other parts of my game to make me more complete. And so I'm very grateful to Doug and Wendell and obviously Joe Sakic early on and other great players that I got a chance to play with. They made me a better player and they kept me develop into more complete hockey player.
It's funny. Looking at that last, or the picture before that was, I saw McGillney in there. You played with Alex McGillney?
Yeah, I had Alex on my wing for a few years as well.
Oh boy, I'll tell you, what a great player he was. I played with him in Buffalo, and I still wonder why his name never comes up for the Hall of Fame. With the numbers that he put up and the ability that he had, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, they don't even bring his goddamn name up. And I'm like, how do you not look at this guy and say he should be in the Hall of Fame? And Steve Larmer's another guy. It just puzzles me like crazy. But
I think Alex, I was a little bit unfortunate. Alex came to Toronto. I think he was 35. I would say he's probably the most talented player I had on the wing. I mean, Ricky, I saw when he had his 50, 60, whatever goal seasons. Obviously, he had problem with his hip when he came and played with me. And I remember going in the gym and I told Alex, Alex, fuck, if you work out and push a little harder, you're going to be able to play many more years in this league. And he looked at me and said, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to do that?
Well, that's the thing about him, right? He seemed to be, as you touched on, he's one of those guys that, and a lot of them do it, a lot of players do it today, but back in that period, he was a guy who actually skated faster with the puck than he did without it. And his skill level was off the charts, even at 35 years of age. Yeah. But he seemed to almost give that impression that he didn't take himself too serious, and hockey was just something he was good at.
I think when he told me that, I think he was really fed up with a bad hip, and obviously it was a struggle for him. But I mean, Alex McGillney playing in today's game when he was in great shape. I mean, he scored 60, 70 goals in today's game where no one allowed to hook and hold on him. But a fantastic first stride, like explosive, and an unbelievable shot, right, Rick?
Oh, Well, everybody asked me, when they asked me, who's the best player you ever played with in the National Hockey League? And his name comes up first for me every single time. I've watched him go from a standstill to full speed in two quick strides.
Yeah.
I saw him put the puck under the defenseman's stick, and the next thing you knew, he was around the defenseman, and he scored a goal. And I go, how the hell did he do that? But it was a lot of fun watching him and getting to play on the same line with him a few times, and I enjoyed it. And then all of a sudden, like me, he hated flying. So I used to sit with him on the flights all the time because it made me feel better, because he was worse than I was. And then he decided the one time that he was not going to fly anymore. So they had to drive him to every single game in the second half of the season. Yeah. I mean, it was like we landed in Detroit from LA. We were changing planes and we had to go to another gate. We're waiting, and somebody said, where's Alex? We're all looking around. I don't know. Well, he ended up taking a bus back to Buffalo from Detroit. After that, he just drove everywhere. They had a driver that took him to all the games, and it was pretty crazy, but he was a phenomenal player, boy, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Matt.
No, I agree with Rick. It's funny you said that, but if I would say who's the most talented player that I play with in Toronto, for sure, he'd be the one. And like I said, he did things on the ice that no one else could do, and he was already 35. Yeah, I mean, I wish he came and played with me like 5 or 6, 7 years before that. It would have been fun.
Yeah.
One of the coaches you played with, you mentioned already, Pat Quinn. You must have had a funny conversation with him when he became your coach. And Pat Burns, and of course, another one who's still coaching today, Paul Maurice. Talk about some of the different subtle differences between their styles of coaching and maybe the influence they had on you.
Well, I think all three of them that you mentioned were great coaches in different ways. I think Pat Quinn was a presence, as a speaker coming into the room. He was one of those guys. And I think for all great coaches and leaders, they have that presence where they don't have to say anything, but you right away sense that you respect this man for what he is. Very honest. He was a player's coach. Like I remember us being the captain all the years when Pat was a coach, and the guys would be back in the plane or the bus. Go up and see if we can get a day off tomorrow, Matt. And I'm like, all right. I don't think Pat said no when I asked him, all these years coming from a road trip or a win or a loss, and guys were tired and say, go up and see if we can get a day off. I don't think he said no once. He said, Matt, you think so? All right, let's have a day off. And so he was certainly, and some of the speeches he had before games, before playoffs and all that, really brought the guys together, and you wanted to win for Pat. I think Pat Burns had absolutely the same presence in the room. He was also very tactical in terms of who he was playing against who, and very maybe even more than Pat in systems and all that, and making sure that we're taking care of defense and all that. But also it seemed, I don't think any coaches at this level, being around for that long as Pat Burns and Pat Quinn, they have the qualities, the pedigrees to be successful and get the guys to rally around them, right? And same with Paul Maurice. And I would say Paul Maurice and Pat Burns more emotional and really pushing the top guys too on the team, and so did Pat Quinn. But Pat Burns and Paul Maurice, they looked at these top guys and, you guys got to lead, and I'm expecting you to lead in practice. I expect you to take care of the guys off the ice, and when we come to game, I'm going to give you the ice time, but I demand you to be the best players out there too, which I think is a lot of respect and a credit to them. And I think having those three guys made me a better player. They gave me ice time. They gave me confidence to be out there and be the best I can be. And very grateful to have a chance to play for all those three guys.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the day off. I don't think I ever went to one of my coaches because I knew the answer was going to be no.
Yeah, and none of the other guys want to go up and ask Pat because everybody was scared of Pat. And I said, I'll go and ask.
Now, name now some of the other guys you played with. Actually, let's. I'd better ask you this: the player who, in your eyes, you played with, or maybe there's a few players, exemplified what being a pro was. The way he carried himself both on the ice and off the ice.
Wow, that's a good one. But I mean, there's so many, I think, and if you play in the National Hockey League for many years, and all the guys that have been there that have careers that surpasses 5-10 years, I think are very professional. I mean, Joe Sakic, obviously, when I came over, very important. Doug Gilmour, I had a chance to play with Gary Roberts, many guys. A guy that was really when we were at the top, going to the conference finals, Russian guy, Dmitry Yushkevich. He was like a tank, blocking shots, nothing really fancy. And I remember Dmitry told me we played together already for a year and a half, almost in the second season together. And he come up to me, he says, Matt, I said, I want to talk to you. I said, all right, what's going on? He said, I didn't really like you the first year. I said, all right. But then he said, now I have so much respect for you. I love you now. I said, thank you very much for that, Dmitry. But, I think the years when we made it to the conference finals, twice, and we had good runs into the second round, many of those years, there was a different group of guys all the time, but there's so many guys that I remember. Obviously, Ty Domi was important for me. He keeps reminding me that I don't have any concussions because of him. He was pretty. But Ty was really great, and he was, as you know, he's a better player than given credit for. He was important, but there was so many guys. Curtis Joseph. We have so many, and I'm probably forgetting guys too. But I'm very grateful to the Pat Quinn era, parts of the Pat Burns as well, and Paul Maurice. But those years with Pat, where we went deep into the playoffs, we had really strong groups. And for me, I'm a big believer if you have the culture in the room and when guys started playing for each other, and when you have the top players on the fourth line are as committed to winning and doing the stuff on the ice, then you have a great chance to go deep in the playoffs. And those years were very important for me, and that's why we did well, I think.
Well, I remember those years very well because I was doing Leafs TV at the time, and I remember those playoff pushes and everything. And unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to go that far. I think the second round was the furthest I got, but getting to see that from a different perspective, being on Leafs TV was fabulous. It was so much fun. And then I was there when you scored your 500th goal, and I remember that like it was yesterday.
Yep, I was at that game too, as a matter of fact, against Calgary.
Calgary Flames, slapper from just inside the blue line, top shelf.
Yes.
Now, a couple of guys you mentioned as pros on and off the ice were also Hall of Fame pranksters by the name of Doug Gilmour and Ty Domi. Were you ever a victim of one or both of those guys pranking you?
You know what? For sure. Almost every week, I think, in different ways. But Dougie was probably the funniest with all those different pranks. But I think, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think when you have guys like that in a dressing room, they're playing in a market like Toronto. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of media focus. You're together in a long, grinding season, playing every other day. You go into playoffs. To have someone actually ease up the tension in a dressing room on a daily basis, where guys enjoy coming in, whether it's a pregame, pre-practice stretch, or I remember and there's a lot of teasing going on and joking with each other. I think that's so important when you try to bond the team and get guys to commit to each other, that high ceiling, a lot of joking, but that kind of builds that glue in a team, and make guys come together. So I think those are kind of secrets that you don't think about as a player, and that goes beyond the players. I think the training staff and everybody's around, the equipment managers. When guys have a little bit of that glare in their eyes and there's jokes being around, that's so important for a team to be able to manage to go through a long season, and then even better into a playoff. So very important. I think those players that did that, and Dougie was one, Ty, Glenn Healy was one that when I played with. There's a bunch of them. Very important to build that culture of a team.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, when I was in Toronto, I mostly all older guys, and there was a few pranksters. And the funniest one I can remember, though, happened to the owner. Harold used to get his legs rubbed before practice, but on this particular day, he decided to do it after practice. So he was in the shower and sauna, whatever, and one of the guys had put the baby powder in the hairdryer. And then we see him coming out of the shower when we walk back in the dressing room, and we're like, oh, God. Well, sure enough, he grabbed that hairdryer. There was all over him. There was baby powder, and he came out. He thought it was the funniest joke ever, and he laughed his ass off. I can't remember who did it, but we had 3 or 4 guys that were always doing those types of things, and I think that just took a little bit of pressure off us going into games.
Yeah.
Well, a guy like Doug Gilmour, there's nobody that's safe. He told us a story that when he was in Calgary, they were at a neighbor's for outside in the winter doing a fire and standing around and having drinks. And he tapped one of the neighbors on the shoulder and said, "Come on in here with me." And he went into the guy's kitchen and took all the labels off all the cans in the pantry. And I'll tell you, when we had him on our show, I had to check my shoes before I got up from the table here, because even though he was on a screen, I didn't trust him. I thought maybe something was going to happen to me or something was going to blow up on my face. So
well, every time I see him, like if I'm around him, all of a sudden I get a pinch on the back of my leg, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? It's Dougie.
So anyway, we just got a couple minutes left, and we want to tie you up too long here, Mats. And again, thank you for joining us. Something about playing for the Maple Leafs that you've touched on a number of things, but that not only surprised you, but would surprise the listeners.
I think the listeners know, and the respect that when you're a player for the Maple Leafs and wear that blue and white, Toronto Maple Leafs is an institution in Canada. I tell my friends here in Sweden, it's by far the hockey is the number one sport in Canada, and to get a chance to be a player and wear the blue and white, it's such a privilege, and I feel so blessed now, long after my career, to be able to spend 13 years for the Toronto Maple Leafs, to have fans come up to me and pull up their sleeve and said, "Mats, I bleed blue and white, man. Come on, let's win the Stanley Cup." It was such a huge honor, and the older I get, I really appreciate it so much. I'm so grateful to get a chance to represent the great fans of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the city of Toronto, and the greatest franchise in hockey. And for me, those moments, and obviously I carry with me the rest of my life, and take those experiences also with me the rest of my life.
Squid?
Yeah, there's no question about that. You're very correct on that, Mats. And what amazed me when I came to Toronto was going to other cities and seeing how many fans were Leaf fans in the stands. I mean, like everywhere in Canada, we go to Vancouver and 50% of the fans would be Leaf fans. I mean, It was fabulous. It was, you can't get any better than that when you go on the road and you feel like you're the home team.
Exactly. And same in lots in LA, Tampa, wherever we went, there's great support for the great franchise Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
Well, Mats, I don't know if you know or not, but you probably don't. But during the 2018-19 season, I followed them. I'm retired, obviously. I followed the Maple Leafs for all 89 games throughout the season. And I documented all the I met fans at every rink. I met Rick a couple of times doing things for the Leafs. And some of the stories that people shared with me were just unbelievable, like how open they were and how far this team goes back, right to the 30s with teams and generations of being passed down. And all these people, I mean, everywhere across North America. And there was a different story from people putting players' numbers on the parents' grave to weddings being postponed because the Leafs were playing, or birthdays, all these kind of things. And all these stories that were shared with me was just, it was unbelievable. Me being a fan all my life, but going out and finding this and these people sharing these stories was just something else.
Great work. That stuff is great. More of that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Mats, I want to thank you so much.
Before we leave, though, Mats,
I
got to say that, like, what you've done in Toronto and what you achieved is, you know, the sweater retired, the statue, 500 goals, the leading point guy for the Leafs of all time. I mean, I got to say that is just outstanding, and you deserve all the accolades that you get for what you did with the Leafs.
Yep, hear you.
Thank you very much, Rick. And coming from a great player like yourself and a former captain, it means even more. Thank you very much. I got to try to just convince my kids to respect me more. You know, they keep forgetting that I used to play hockey at the highest level, but now they just see me as dad. So I have to show them. I have to get on the internet and show them some old hockey clips.
Yeah,
or get them on the ice
I
and pick down around them a couple of times.
Exactly.
All right, Mats. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. Great seeing you, and thanks once again, and all the best in the future.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a great afternoon there.
Thanks, Mats.
All right. Thanks.